This video is brought to you by SPX Performance Suspension. More on them later. Have you ever been playing MX bikes and wondered just how good factory suspension in this game could be? And by factory suspension, I mean someone who's actually tested suspension and made it better. Well, today on this MXBGP of Flanders track at Lommel, we are going to do a test of that. I did a video last week playing Kegums in the MXBGP track and got reached out to by Splasx, and it is pronounced Splash, not Splasx, from SPX Performance, who said, hey, I saw your video. I think that you could use a little bit of help with suspension. And I said, yes, please. Thank you very much. I have no idea what I'm doing with this, trying to get better and figure it out. And his brand is really actually pretty cool. So we'll talk about that in a minute. But basically what he said is, I want to send you a setup. I want to see you try it on one of these gnarly MXBGP tracks and see if it actually makes you better. So here is the test that we're going to do today. We're basically doing a test A and a test B. Now test A, as you can see here, I'm just going to go try to learn the track at first and figure it out and try to get my lines dialed in basically. And then test A, we're going to do a full stock suspension only, 30-minute moto basically, get some laps down, try to figure out if I can actually do a decent lap on this track. And then we will jump over to the factory suspension and try to get better there. So after about 30 minutes of play on the track, this was my best lap on stock suspension at Lommel. We did a 2:14.3 just before this, so I had known I was on the way to improvement, and I was starting to figure out my lines on this track as well. The key to riding sand in this game, and I've learned this to be true with MX Simulator in the past, I was a pretty decent sand rider in that game too, is to not rush anything. Really, momentum is king on sand tracks, and so if you're trying to get through a switchback section really fast, flying into the corner and bouncing off something and then bouncing back across the track can be fast, no question about it. But more often than not, you actually go slower because you end up hitting something wrong or getting sideways, and then you lose all that momentum. So you can see this lap isn't perfect. There are things that I'm not going as fast as I probably should be on the lap. But I am just trying to get the lines dialed in, like I said, and make sure that it all flows together. And I wanted to just see that with stock suspension, what it felt like over this track when you're actually pushing on it too. I'll talk about the lap times comparatively to qualifying times for the EU series in ARL of MXBGP in just a minute, and the EU is European, and they have limited qualifying time, so this is kind of what I was trying to do. The same thing with the MXBGP of Kegums track, where I only gave myself basically an hour to kind of put quali lap times together, because that's pretty much all they have too. And this week, I actually, thanks to a comment on the MXBGP Kegums video, I actually remembered to turn erode off because they do not have the erode or terrain deformation on for qualifying. So I could actually see the lines and see the track and everything like that. So again, stock suspension, just trying to get a decent lap in. You can see that I'm kind of struggling to really connect the lines based on like getting over braking bumps and stuff like that. And I will say when we jump to the SPX Performance test, I obviously have much better lines because I've also learned the track. Another 30 extra minutes on top of that. But coming down to the end of this one, you can see tracking about 3 seconds or so faster than that 2:14. We get the last corner pretty decently, and we're able to jump down to a 2:10.25. So we're going to go in here. We're going to talk about our default suspension setup for just a second. Here's the default sag and static sag. And you might be wondering, okay, so how does SPX Performance actually work? What does this even do? And how do we use it for ourselves? So let's take a second and actually talk about it, shall we? Home of the #1 suspension service in MX bikes, SPX Performance consistently sets the standard for elite performance. With an unwavering commitment to precision and control, we've delivered top-tier suspension trusted by champions. Winning 4 ARL Pro Championships in the 2025 season so far, we've proven our dominance against the competition. Whether you're new or seasoned, SPX Performance is built to win. Championship tested, championship proven. So basically you go to spxperformance.com, and depending on what bike you're using, you buy a setup. They send you the setup in an email, and they can also give you some adjustments and tips to use that setup better for you. But it really is a factory level suspension setup from a factory rider. So we put on the SPX Pro setup now. Obviously this is the secret sauce, so we're not going to show you the suspension, but the sag now we dropped down about 8 millimeters in the rear, and I think it was like 10 or so in the front, and the static sag changed up a little bit as well. So my initial impressions with jumping on the suspension right away, compared to stock, at least on this Lommel track, the stock suspension much more bouncy, reboundy, kind of bounces you up and down over the bumps, which isn't a bad thing in sand because you do like to kind of float from section to section, and being able to kind of bounce off of stuff is nice. But this one is a lot more planted, especially in the rear of the bike. It sits into things a lot easier, and it also definitely corrected some of my mistakes, as we'll talk about coming up here in just a minute. So this is my initial reconnaissance, just kind of trying to feel it out. And if we jump forward now, this is the second lap on this suspension. So I'll talk you through the lap. I'll talk you through some of the things that I was trying to do and trying to feel. But remember, 210.25 is the lap to beat. And pretty much right away, we start tracking a little bit better. I think it's out of this corner. I tuck lower. It's easier to arch off of this corner a little bit easier with the suspension setup. Then we hop in and out of this corner a lot smoother. So the line choices are better, but the suspension was allowing me to do that. It was allowing me to kind of hit things a little bit smoother and faster and take away the choppiness of the racetrack, and almost in a way turn it into not a sand track, like turn it into a smoother racetrack overall that I'm a little bit more comfortable with, because I'm not a good sand rider in bikes yet. And generally just kind of make it easier to go from point A to point B without feeling like these huge bumps are causing you a lot of problems getting there. So even into these corners, bouncing into here, you can see it's much more planted just going through this corner, and we're already tracking 1.7 seconds up, and we're just through the end of the first sector. There's 3 sectors on the track. We're in the middle of sector 2 right now, but even through here, this bouncing through here, like I didn't even get it that good, but it still just kind of, corrects it for me. We're able to bounce off of this pretty smoothly. And then you can see even the rear wheel just tracking down some of these downslopes a little bit better based on the suspension. Now I get this section way wrong, and we'll talk about how much I improved on that with a lap later on. But we bounce through here. We try to go to this inside, and I think this section I definitely got a little bit better on this lap than I did on my complete second lap, but we'll talk about that again a little bit later. Tracking 1.9 better, and we're through the second sector now. So even was a little bit slower in sector 2 than I was on the stock suspension, but getting a little bit sideways certainly contributed to that. Then I found a couple more lines that were a little bit better. You might remember that I made a huge mistake at the end of the straightaway, so we arc into this corner a lot better. Now we're tracking 3.8 seconds better going into the first corner. Come out of here over 4 seconds faster. Again, just the second lap on this suspension, and we come through and we're able to go just under 4 seconds faster, 3.7, laid down a 206.54. And immediately I was like, holy crap, this is a night and day difference with how this actually feels and tracks on the bike in game. So I kept working at it, kept putting more laps down, even just went back to pits and restarted the laps. And this is where I finally kind of put all the puzzle pieces together. And like I said, at the end of this video, we'll talk about where it actually slotted me in based on qualifying, if I actually had tried to qualify on this suspension. So again, the line choices a little bit better. We're even tracking slower in sector 1 so far than the original 206.5 that I put down. But the lines and figuring stuff out on this track, especially with the ability to move around on the suspension, got so much better. So even coming over this hill, we're going a little bit smoother through here. We're just a 0.16 slower than my best lap through sector 1, but then it gets a lot better, like I said. So through here, gain about a half second back right here going into this tabletop section. Get through this corner a little bit cleaner, just kind of bounce off of it smoother, and then get a better drive down here. Actually lost a little bit of time on exit, didn't even notice that, but I felt like I was cooking. And then through here and all the way from here to the finish line was just generally a lot better. We bounce into here a lot smoother. I'm able to kind of hug on this rut a lot nicer, which sets me up for this rut even better, and I can kind of almost track through this little double a little bit better. We get this corner way cleaner, bounce in, bounce out, and don't kill a lot of time right there. Suddenly, bam, 3.2 seconds up on that lap time, and just cooking from here. Now this is where I said I got it a little bit wrong, kind of bounced out of that inside rut and had to bank off the outside, but then we kind of correct it a little bit nicer by getting back in rhythm through here. I feel like I got these last couple corners right here pretty good, and then more or less blew the last corner, which really affected my lap time from being like one of my best laps I've ever ran in the game to just being slightly off of that. But Again, over 3 seconds faster than that. And now we're talking about 7-8 seconds a lap faster than the stock suspension that I had been using. So we come in through here, we're back to 2.5, get in and out of this corner, kind of bounce off it awkwardly, even drag bar a little bit, and we ended up going 2.43 faster than that lap right there. So 2:04.11. We'll check out the lap times here in the chart. There's my 2:04.107 technically. My ideal lap time of 2:02.352. So remember that 2:02.352. If we go back in here, this is where I would have slotted with a stock setup basically in qualifying out of the top 100. Then we're getting closer to the 70s with the suspension setup, and we're only 4 seconds off of basically making it into the A group. But then if you talk about the NA series, I'm much closer in right there. I'm only about maybe 3 seconds off of qualifying for the A group there, and we actually slotted into the top 50 in the NA series. So a lot better, and genuinely speaking, a huge help to have a good suspension setup. If you guys don't even use SPX Performance, which I do recommend, just work on changing stuff in your suspension, really figuring out what it does and why, because as you can see with me, an hour on the track, I was able to make over 7 seconds of improvements based on just a good suspension setup adjustment, and it matters. It matters a ton. So thanks again to SPX Performance. Head over to spxperformance.com if you guys want to try out setups as well. They even have some free clicker adjustments for you guys that you can check out and see if it works for you. And again, thanks to Splasx for reaching out. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, let me know in the comment section below, and we'll see you guys again soon. So long for now. If you liked that video, be sure to subscribe to the channel for much more motocross gaming content.